Picture this, you're a single dad, doing your best to raise your daughter after losing your wife. Life is hard enough without aliens showing up at your doorstep. But, when a scared alien girl seeks refuge in your home, speaking of her mother's dying words, you think you're just helping another lost child. What you don't realize is that this moment will reveal humanity's most terrifying secret, one that has kept the entire galaxy in balance for millennia. A secret so profound that even humans themselves have forgotten it. A secret that explains why, despite being the youngest species in the galaxy, no alien civilization has ever dared to truly threaten Earth. The alien girl's mother knew. And, now, as her daughter whispers those final words, a human father is about to discover why the galaxy fears us more than we could ever imagine. Some stories are about humans proving their worth among the stars. This is about humans remembering what they really are. And, once you remember, you can never forget. Marcus Chen had been having the kind of day that made him question every decision he'd made since Sarah died. The washing machine had flooded the basement, his 7-year-old daughter Emma had come home with a black eye from defending a classmate from bullies, and, his boss had called to inform him that the quarterly reports were due 3 days earlier than expected. Now, as rain hammered against his kitchen windows at 9 in the evening, all he wanted was to get Emma fed, bathed, and, into bed so he could collapse with a beer and, pretend tomorrow might be better. The knock on his door came soft and, hesitant, barely audible over the storm. Marcus almost ignored it, figuring it was probably Mrs. Henderson from next door looking for her cat again. But, something about the rhythm of the knocking struck him as wrong. Too careful. Too afraid. When he opened the door, his first thought was that some kid was playing an elaborate prank. The girl standing on his porch couldn't have been more than 12, but she was unlike any child he'd ever seen. Her skin had a faint bluish tint that became more pronounced around her large, dark eyes. Her hair fell in silver cascades past her shoulders, and, when she looked up at him, those eyes held a depth of sadness that no child should carry. She was soaked to the bone, wearing what looked like a torn jumpsuit made from some material that seemed to shimmer even in the porch light. Her feet were bare, and, Marcus could see cuts and bruises on her arms and legs. Most unsettling of all, she was trembling not just from cold, but from what was clearly terror. "Please," she said in perfect English, though her voice carried an odd harmonic quality that made Marcus's ears tingle. "My mother said to find the humans when the hunters came. She said they would understand. She said they would remember." Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his rational mind trying to process what he was seeing. The girl was clearly not human, but she wasn't wearing a costume either. The slight glow emanating from her skin, the way her hair moved as if it had a mind of its own, the subtle differences in her facial structure, this was real. "Daddy?" Emma's voice came from behind him. "Who is it?" Marcus turned to see his daughter peering around his legs, her dark hair still damp from her bath, wearing her favorite unicorn pajamas. When Emma saw the alien girl, her eyes went wide with wonder rather than fear. "She's hurt," Emma said simply, then, looked up at Marcus with the kind of moral clarity that only children possessed. "We have to help her." The alien girl's eyes filled with tears that seemed to catch and refract the light in impossible ways. "Please," she repeated. "The hunters killed my mother. She made me promise to find humans. She said her grandmother told her stories, old stories about what humans really are. She said if I could find them, they would protect me." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, some instinct he didn't understand. Looking at this scared child, alien or not, he couldn't bring himself to turn her away. Sarah would have already been wrapping her in blankets and making hot chocolate. The thought of his deceased wife made the decision for him. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "You're safe here." The girl stumbled across the threshold, and Marcus caught her as her legs gave out. She was lighter than he'd expected, and colder. Much colder. As he helped her to the couch, he noticed Emma had already disappeared, returning moments later with the emergency blanket they kept in the hall closet. "What's your name?" Emma asked, settling beside the alien girl with the fearless acceptance that made Marcus both proud and worried about his daughter's future. Zara, the girl replied, accepting the blanket gratefully. I was, of the Kithra. We lived in the outer settlements of Kepler, 442b. Marcus had heard of Kepler, 442b. It was one of the first confirmed habitable exoplanets, about 1,200 light-years from Earth. The fact that this girl had somehow traveled that distance and ended up on his doorstep raised 1,000 questions he wasn't ready to ask. The hunters, Zara continued, her voice growing stronger as warmth returned to her body. They came in ships that looked like metal tiers. They said we had information about the old ones, about the First War. My mother told them we knew nothing, but they didn't believe her. Emma reached out and took Zara's hand, a gesture so natural and compassionate that Marcus felt his throat tighten. It's okay, his daughter said. Daddy keeps us safe. He's really good at it. Zara looked between them, confusion clear in her large eyes. But, you're human, she said slowly. Why aren't you afraid of me? Why aren't you calling the authorities? In all the stories, humans are supposed to be the most territorial species in the galaxy. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Stories? The old stories, Zara said. Every species knows them. How humans came from a death world and conquered half the galaxy in less than 1,000 years. How they disappeared just as suddenly, leaving behind only warnings and empty worlds. How they made the covenant of silence that keeps the galaxy from destroying itself. Marcus exchanged a look with Emma, who shrugged with 7-year-old wisdom. I've never conquered anything except the monkey bars at school, Emma said seriously. Despite everything, Zara smiled at that. It was the first time her expression had lightened since she'd arrived. My mother said the humans forgot who they were. She said it was part of the plan, part of what made them so dangerous. They would seem weak and harmless until something threatened what they cared about. A chill ran down Marcus's spine that had nothing to do with the storm outside. What exactly did your mother tell you about humans? Zara's expression grew grave again. That they were the reason the galaxy had been at peace for 3,000 years. That they had fought something so terrible in the First War that afterwards, all the other species agreed to the covenant. No large-scale warfare. No planetary conquests. No extinction events. All to keep the humans from remembering what they had to become to save everyone. She paused, looking directly into Marcus's eyes. But, the hunters, they want the old knowledge. They want to break the covenant. They think if they can find the hidden human colonies, if they can wake up whatever made humans so feared, they can control it. Marcus felt something stirring in the back of his mind, like a memory trying to surface from a dream. For just a moment, he could have sworn he smelled smoke and, burning metal, could hear the sound of ships screaming through atmosphere. But, the sensation passed so quickly he almost thought he'd imagined it. Why did your mother send you to find humans specifically? He asked. Because, Zara said, her voice dropping to a whisper, she said humans were the only species in the galaxy that the others feared. And, if the hunters are looking for the old weapons, if they're trying to wake the others again, then, only humans can stop them. Emma looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. Daddy, what are the others? Marcus found himself wishing he knew. But, as he looked at this scared alien child who had somehow found her way to his door, as he felt that strange stirring in his mind grow stronger, he was beginning to suspect that perhaps, somewhere deep down, he did know. They all did. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. The next morning brought no answers, only more questions. Marcus had called in sick to work, unable to leave Emma and Zara alone and, equally unable to explain to his boss why he needed a mental health day to process the existence of extraterrestrial life. Zara had slept fitfully on the couch, occasionally crying out in a language that sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. Emma had insisted on sleeping on the floor beside her, claiming that nobody should be alone when they're scared. Now, as Marcus made breakfast for 3 instead of 2, he watched the girls interact with a mixture of amazement and concern. Emma was teaching Zara how to braid her silver hair, while Zara was showing Emma how to make her fingers glow with the same soft light that seemed to emanate from her skin. "It's bioluminescence," Zara explained as Emma giggled with delight at her glowing fingertips. "All Kithra can do it. It helps us communicate in the deep caverns of our homeworld." Marcus flipped pancakes and tried to process this casual display of alien physiology happening at his kitchen table. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been whether Emma was eating enough vegetables. Now he was wondering if his daughter was safe being exposed to alien biology. "Zara," he said carefully, "when you say your mother told you to find humans, did she say how you were supposed to find us? I mean, Earth isn't exactly easy to get to." Zara's expression grew troubled. "She gave me this," she said, reaching into her torn jumpsuit and pulling out what looked like a small crystalline pendant. The moment it came into view, Marcus felt that strange stirring in his mind again, stronger this time. "She said it was older than the Covenant. She said it would guide me to humans, and that when I found them, they would know what to do with it." The pendant seemed to pulse with its own inner light, and Marcus could swear he heard something, not quite sound, more like a vibration that resonated in his bones. Emma looked up from her glowing fingers, her face suddenly serious. "Daddy," she said quietly, "I can hear it singing." Marcus set down his spatula and moved closer to the table. As he approached the pendant, the sensation in his mind intensified. Images flashed behind his eyes, vast ships moving between stars, worlds burning and, then, healing, faces he almost recognized but couldn't quite place. "May I?" he asked, reaching toward the pendant. Zara nodded and placed it in his palm. The moment the crystal touched his skin, the world exploded into light and memory. Marcus saw Earth as it had been 3,000 years ago, but not the primitive world he expected. Instead, he saw massive cities that stretched from ground to sky, ships that moved between dimensions as easily as driving down a street, and humans who looked exactly like him but carried themselves with the confidence of gods. He saw the others, beings of pure hatred and hunger that moved through space like a plague, consuming entire systems and leaving nothing but empty void behind. He saw the war that followed, a conflict so vast and terrible that it threatened to tear apart the very fabric of reality. And he saw what humans had to become to stop it. The visions faded, leaving Marcus gasping and shaken. Emma and Zara were both staring at him with concern. "Daddy?" Emma said. "You looked scary for a second. Your eyes were glowing just like Zara's." Marcus looked down at his hands and realized he could still feel the pendant's energy flowing through him, could still sense something vast and patient stirring in the depths of his mind. When he met Zara's eyes, he saw recognition there. "You remember," she whispered. "Not everything," Marcus said slowly. "But, enough. Enough to know that your mother was right to send you here. And, enough to know that we're all in more danger than we realized." The sound of vehicles pulling into his driveway cut off any further conversation. Marcus moved to the window and felt his blood turn to ice. 3 black SUVs had surrounded his house, and men in tactical gear were already positioning themselves around the perimeter. "The hunters," Zara breathed, her face going pale. "They found me." Marcus felt something shift inside him, something primal and protective and utterly human. As he watched armed figures prepare to assault his home, to threaten his daughter and the alien child they had promised to protect, that stirring in his mind became a roar. "Emma," he said, his voice calm despite the fury building in his chest, "take Zara to the basement. Stay there until I come get you." "But, Daddy, now, sweetheart. Please." Emma must have heard something in his tone that brooked no argument, because she grabbed Zara's hand and headed for the basement door. As they disappeared down the stairs, Marcus felt the pendant in his hand pulse once more, and, suddenly, he understood why the galaxy feared humans. They hadn't forgotten how to be peaceful. They had chosen to be peaceful. And, there was a profound difference between the two. The front door exploded inward, and 6 armed figures in tactical gear stormed into his kitchen. They moved with military precision, but Marcus could see something in their movements that suggested they weren't entirely human either. Their leader, a tall figure whose face was hidden behind a reflective visor, raised a weapon that looked like nothing Marcus had ever seen. "Where is the Kithra child?" the figure demanded, its voice electronically modified but carrying undertones that hurt Marcus's ears. Marcus looked at the weapon pointed at his chest, at the destruction these beings had brought into his home, at the breakfast he'd been making for his daughter and a scared alien child. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made at her funeral to always protect Emma. He thought about Zara's tears and the trust in her eyes when she'd asked for help. And Marcus Chen, software engineer and single father, remembered exactly what humans were capable of when something they cared about was threatened. "You made a mistake coming here," he said quietly. The hunter with the weapon laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "One human. You think you can stop us?" Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since the pendant had shown him those ancient memories, he felt completely and utterly himself. "No," he said. "But, then, again, there's never just one of us." The pendant in his hand erupted with light, and, suddenly, Marcus wasn't alone anymore. The light from the pendant spread through Marcus like liquid fire, but, instead of burning, it felt like coming home. Suddenly, he could sense every human within a 50-mile radius. Not just their presence, but their potential. Mrs. Henderson next door, who had been a combat medic in Afghanistan. The college student 3 blocks down who had martial arts training. The construction worker across town who possessed reflexes that had saved his crew from a crane collapse last month. All of them connected now, all of them aware. The hunter with the weapon hesitated, something in Marcus's expression causing it to take a step back. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Marcus replied, his voice carrying harmonics that made the windows vibrate. "I just remembered who we are." The pendant's energy cascaded outward like ripples in a pond, and Marcus felt the response as thousands of humans throughout the city suddenly stopped what they were doing. A businessman paused mid-sentence in a board meeting, his head tilting as ancient memories stirred. A teacher in a third-grade classroom felt her hands begin to glow with the same soft light emanating from Marcus. An elderly man feeding pigeons in the park stood straighter as forgotten knowledge flooded back. The hunter raised its weapon, but, before it could fire, the weapon simply stopped working. The electronic components didn't malfunction, they simply refused to function in the presence of whatever Marcus had become. The creature stared at its useless technology, confusion evident even through its visor. 3,000 years ago, Marcus said, advancing slowly toward the intruders, humans made a choice. We could have ruled the galaxy. We could have made every other species kneel. Instead, we chose to forget. We chose to become ordinary. We chose peace. The hunters backed toward the destroyed doorway, but Marcus could sense others of his kind converging on his location. Not just neighbors, but humans from across the city who had felt the call and abandoned whatever they were doing to respond. They moved with purpose now, their steps synchronized in a way that suggested communication beyond speech. But, the thing about humans, Marcus continued, and, now his eyes were definitely glowing, casting blue-white light across the kitchen, is that we never really forget anything. We just bury it deep and hope we never need it again. The lead hunter activated some kind of communication device, speaking rapidly in a language that sounded like grinding metal. Marcus understood every word, another gift of his awakening. The creature was calling for backup, reporting that the human population was experiencing cascade activation and requesting immediate evacuation of all hunter assets from Earth. "Too late for that," said a new voice from the doorway. Marcus turned to see Mrs. Henderson standing in the entrance, but she looked nothing like the frail 70-year-old widow he'd known for 5 years. Her back was straight, her eyes held the same blue glow as his own, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had once commanded fleets of starships. "Hello, Marcus," she said with a smile. "It's good to be awake again." Behind her, more humans were arriving. The college student from down the street, now moving with the fluid grace of someone trained in combat forms that wouldn't be developed for another 1,000 years. The mailman, whose understanding of local geography had suddenly expanded to include supply lines and strategic positions. The barista from the coffee shop, whose talent for reading people had become an ability to assess threat levels and tactical advantages. All of them glowing. All of them aware. All of them focused on the hunters in Marcus's kitchen with the kind of attention a pack of wolves might give a wounded deer. "The Covenant," one of the hunters stammered, its electronic voice cracking with fear. "The Covenant forbids human military action." Mrs. Henderson laughed, and the sound was like music mixed with thunder. "The Covenant forbids human conquest, child. It says nothing about protecting our own." Marcus felt Emma's presence in the basement, could sense her wonder and confusion as she felt the change in him through their father-daughter bond. Zara was with her, and the alien girl's emotions were a mixture of awe, terror, and something that might have been hope. "You threatened my daughter," Marcus said to the hunters, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You threatened a child who asked for our protection. Do you understand what that means?" The lead hunter tried to activate some kind of personal shield, but, like its weapon, the device simply refused to function. "This is impossible," it said. "Humans are weak. Humans are scattered. Humans forgot their power millennia ago." "No," said another voice from the backyard. Marcus turned to see his neighbor Dave climbing through the destroyed patio door. Dave, who worked at the DMV and whose biggest concern yesterday had been whether his lawn needed reseeding. Now he moved like a predator, and his eyes held knowledge of starship designs and dimensional physics. "We hid our power. There's a difference." The hunters were surrounded now, and Marcus could feel the terror radiating from them. They had come expecting to find a lone alien refugee and intimidate a single human family. Instead, they had triggered something they clearly hadn't known existed. "Please," the lead hunter said, and Marcus was surprised to hear genuine fear in its electronically modified voice. "We were following orders. We didn't know. The council said humans were no longer a threat." "What council?" Mrs. Henderson asked, moving closer to the creatures with predatory grace. "The Hegemony Council," the hunter replied quickly. "They rule 17 sectors now. They found ruins from the First War, technology that the others left behind. They think they can control it." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. The others had been defeated in the First War, but not destroyed. They had been contained, locked away in dimensional pockets that required constant monitoring. If someone was tampering with that ancient technology. "Where?" he demanded. "The Vega system," the hunter said. "They've established a research facility on Vega Prime. They're trying to open a gateway, to communicate with the others. They think they can make a deal." The assembled humans exchanged glances loaded with meaning. Marcus could feel their shared knowledge, their understanding of what this meant. The others couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be bargained with. They were hunger given form, destruction given purpose. Any attempt to communicate with them would end only in catastrophe. "How many species are part of this hegemony?" Dave asked. 47, the hunter replied. "The Zelthrani, the Makari, the Vashti Collective, the..." "Enough," Marcus interrupted. He could feel the rage building among his neighbors, the awakening humans who remembered what the others had done to the galaxy 3,000 years ago. Entire worlds burned to ash. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years snuffed out in moments. The only reason anything had survived was because humans had been willing to become something monstrous enough to fight monsters. "Emma," he called toward the basement. "Bring Zara up here, sweetheart. It's safe now." The two girls emerged from the basement, Emma's eyes wide with curiosity and Zara trembling with a mixture of fear and recognition. When Zara saw the assembled humans, all glowing with that inner light, she fell to her knees. "The Guardians," she whispered. "You're the Guardians of the First War." Marcus felt another surge of memory. Yes, that's what they had called themselves. Not conquerors, not rulers. Guardians. Protectors of a galaxy too young and too fragile to protect itself. "Zara," Marcus said gently, kneeling beside the alien girl. "Your mother was right to send you to us. But, I need you to be brave now. I need you to tell us everything you know about these hunters, about the hegemony, about what they did to your people." Zara nodded, wiping tears from her large eyes. "They came 3 days ago," she began. "They said they were looking for information about the First War, about something called the Nexus Points. My mother told them we knew nothing, but they had devices that could read memories." Marcus felt Mrs. Henderson tense beside him. The Nexus Points had been one of the most closely guarded secrets of the First War. They were dimensional anchor points, places where the barriers between realities were thin enough to allow travel between dimensions. The humans had used them to trap the others in pocket universes, but, if someone was looking for them. "They found something in my grandmother's memories," Zara continued. "Something about a map, hidden on Earth. They tortured her until she told them about the pendant, about how it could lead them to human settlements." Marcus looked down at the crystal still clutched in his hand. It wasn't just a beacon to find humans, it was a key. A key to the dimensional locks that kept the others imprisoned. "We have to stop them," he said, standing and facing the assembled humans. "If they find the other Nexus Points, if they manage to open even one dimensional lock." He didn't need to finish. Every awakened human in the room understood the implications. The others wouldn't be grateful for their freedom. They wouldn't honor any bargain the hegemony thought they were making. They would simply resume their interrupted feast, consuming everything they could reach until the galaxy was nothing but empty void. "What about the Covenant?" one of the hunters asked desperately. "If humans take military action, if you break the peace accords, the Covenant was never about keeping humans peaceful," Mrs. Henderson said with grim smile. "It was about keeping everyone else peaceful so humans wouldn't have to wake up. But, you've changed the rules now. You've threatened our children and, you're playing with forces you don't understand." Marcus felt something shift in the dimensional fabric around them, a sense of barriers falling and locks opening. Not the dimensional prisons holding the others, something else. Something that had been holding back the full extent of human potential. "Emma," he said to his daughter, "I need you to stay with Mrs. Henderson. What Daddy has to do now might be dangerous." Emma looked up at him with Sarah's eyes, intelligent and concerned. "Are you going to space?" The simplicity of the question, asked with such complete trust, nearly broke his heart. "Yes, sweetheart. I have to go help some people who are in trouble. Like how we helped Zara." "Exactly like that." Emma nodded solemnly, then hugged his legs. "Be careful, Daddy. And, come back soon." As Marcus held his daughter, he felt the weight of every human mind that had awakened. They were scattered across the globe, but they were connected now in ways that transcended simple communication. A teacher in Tokyo was already designing ships using principles of physics that wouldn't be discovered for centuries. A mechanic in Detroit was modifying his tools to work with exotic matter. A grandmother in Mumbai was remembering how to navigate between stars using nothing but intuition and mathematics. The hunters watched this display with growing horror, finally, understanding what they had unleashed. "You," Marcus said, pointing to the lead hunter. "Take a message to your Hegemony Council. Tell them that humans are awake now. Tell them to abandon their research and withdraw from the Vega system. Tell them they have 72 hours before we come to shut it down ourselves. And, if they refuse?" Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since his awakening, he allowed the full weight of human potential to show in his expression. The hunters stumbled backward, their fear so intense that Marcus could smell it through their environmental suits. "Then, they'll learn why the galaxy has been so peaceful for the last 3,000 years, he said softly. The hunters fled, stumbling over each other in their haste to reach their vehicles. Marcus watched them go, then, turned to face his neighbors, his fellow guardians, who were already making preparations for what was to come. "We'll need ships," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had once commanded stellar fleets. "The old shipyards are still hidden in the asteroid belt. They'll need some work, but the basic infrastructure is intact. I can handle the navigation systems," Dave added. "The star charts are coming back to me now." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. He had been a software engineer yesterday, but 3,000 years ago he had been something else entirely. Something the galaxy had needed then, and, apparently needed again now. "Zara," he said, turning to the alien girl who was watching the proceedings with wide eyes. "We're going to stop the people who hurt your family. But, I need to know, are there other survivors? Other Kithra who might have information about what the hegemony is planning?" Zara shook her head sadly. "The hunters were very thorough. But, my mother mentioned something before she died, something about other species that had hidden archives. The Kithra weren't the only ones who remembered the old stories." Marcus felt a surge of hope. If other species had maintained records of the First War, if they still understood the danger the others represented, then, perhaps the hegemony's influence wasn't as complete as they believed. "Then, we'll find them," he said. "We'll unite everyone who remembers, everyone who understands what's at stake." He looked around at his neighbors, his fellow humans, all of them glowing with awakened potential. 3,000 years ago, they had saved the galaxy by becoming something terrible and wonderful. Now they would have to do it again. But, this time, they wouldn't forget who they were. This time, they wouldn't hide their light under a bushel of deliberate ignorance. The galaxy had tried to manage without its guardians, and, it had nearly destroyed itself in the process. "Emma," he said, kneeling beside his daughter one more time. "Daddy has to go away for a while, but Mrs. Henderson and the others will take care of you. And Zara will be here too. You'll be safe." Emma nodded, then, surprised him by turning to Zara. "Will you teach me how to make my fingers glow?" Zara smiled through her tears. "Yes. I would like that very much." As Marcus stood to leave, he felt the pendant pulse once more, and, suddenly, he could sense something vast and patient stirring in the depths of space. Not the others, something else. Something that had been waiting for humanity to remember itself. The stars were calling, and, for the first time in 3,000 years, humans were ready to answer. The Prometheus station had been hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter for 3 millennia, disguised as just another chunk of space debris. As Marcus approached it in the small transport ship that had materialized in Earth's orbit within hours of his awakening, he marveled at how perfectly camouflaged it remained. Even knowing it was there, his enhanced senses could barely distinguish it from the surrounding asteroids. But, as they drew closer, the station began to reveal itself. What had appeared to be a roughly spherical rock started to unfold like a mechanical flower, layers of hidden armor plating retracting to expose docking bays, sensor arrays, and weapon systems that made Marcus's newly awakened memories sing with recognition. This wasn't just a shipyard, it was a fortress, a place where humanity had prepared for wars they hoped never to fight again. "Welcome home, Guardian," came a voice over the communication system, though Marcus knew it wasn't another human speaking. The station's AI had awakened along with humanity, ancient subroutines coming online as the quantum locks that had kept them dormant finally released their hold. Marcus docked the transport and stepped into corridors he hadn't walked for 3,000 years but somehow still knew by heart. The station hummed around him, automated systems performing maintenance routines that had been waiting centuries to resume. As he made his way to the primary control center, He passed construction bays where ships were already taking shape, assembling themselves from molecular fabricators that drew raw materials from the asteroid field. The control center was a vast spherical chamber at the station's heart, its walls covered with displays showing the current state of the galaxy. Marcus felt his breath catch as he took in the scope of the hegemony's influence. 47 species, thousands of worlds, entire sectors under their control. But, scattered throughout their territory were pockets of resistance, species that remembered the old warnings, worlds that had maintained hidden defenses against the day the others might return. "Status report," he said to the empty air, knowing the station would understand. The displays shifted, showing real-time intelligence gathered by sensor networks humanity had left throughout the galaxy. The hegemony wasn't just researching other technology, they had found 3 separate nexus points and were attempting to stabilize dimensional gateways at all of them simultaneously. Worse, they had captured several members of species that had maintained archives from the First War, torturing them for information about human defense protocols. Marcus felt rage build in his chest, the same protective fury that had driven him when the hunters threatened Emma. But, this was bigger than one scared alien child seeking refuge. This was about preventing the kind of galactic catastrophe that would make the First War look like a minor skirmish. "Incoming transmission," the station's AI announced. "Origin, multiple points throughout local space. Guardian network establishing connection." The displays around Marcus shifted to show dozens of human faces, each one glowing with the same inner light that marked the awakened. He recognized some of them. Mrs. Henderson appeared to be speaking from what looked like another hidden station, while Dave was clearly aboard a ship that was moving between Earth and Luna. But, others were strangers, humans who had been living ordinary lives on colony worlds and research stations throughout the solar system until the awakening call had reached them. "Report," Marcus said, falling naturally into the command structure that had governed humanity during the First War. "Guardian Henderson, Luna Base 7, Mrs. Henderson began, her voice carrying across space with perfect clarity. "Defense grid is coming online. Weapon platforms that have been disguised as communication satellites are revealing themselves and moving to optimal positions. We'll have full coverage of the inner system within 6 hours. Guardian Williams, Europa Research Station," another voice added. Marcus saw a middle-aged woman who looked like she had been a marine biologist until yesterday. "Deep space sensors are detecting massive fleet movements in the Vega system. Whatever the hegemony is planning, they're committing significant resources to it." One by one, the reports came in. Humans throughout the solar system were awakening to their true nature, activating systems that had lain dormant since the end of the First War. Hidden bases were revealing themselves on asteroids and moons. Ships that had been disguised as research vessels were dropping their camouflage and showing their true military capabilities. The solar system was transforming from a peaceful collection of human colonies into the fortress it had always been designed to be. But, Marcus knew it wouldn't be enough. The hegemony had 47 species and thousands of ships at their disposal. Humanity might be awakening, but they were still vastly outnumbered. "Guardian Chen," came a new voice, and Marcus turned to see a face he recognized from the deepest of his recovered memories. Commander Sarah Kim had been his second-in-command during the final battle of the First War, the woman who had helped him design the dimensional locks that contained the others. According to his records, she had died 3,000 years ago, but here she was, speaking to him from what appeared to be the bridge of a massive starship. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "How is this possible?" She smiled, and he could see the weight of millennia in her eyes. "Not all of us chose to forget, Marcus. Some of us volunteered to remain awake, to watch and wait for the day when humanity might need its guardians again. I've been monitoring the galaxy from deep space, maintaining the early warning networks, ensuring that the dimensional locks remain stable." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and guilt wash over him. While he had been living a peaceful life on Earth, raising his daughter and working at his mundane job, Sarah had been carrying the burden of protecting the galaxy alone. "There are others," she continued. 12 ships, scattered throughout the galaxy, each one crewed by volunteers who chose to remain vigilant. We've been tracking the hegemony's activities for decades, watching their slow expansion and waiting for the moment when they would cross the line. Why didn't you intervene earlier? Another guardian asked. The Covenant, Sarah replied. As long as they weren't directly threatening the dimensional locks or attempting to communicate with the others, we had to honor the peace accords. But, when they captured the Kithra archives, when they started looking for nexus points. She shrugged. That changed everything. Marcus studied the tactical displays surrounding him, his enhanced mind processing information at superhuman speeds. The hegemony had made a critical error. They had assumed that humanity's peaceful behavior over the past 3 millennia meant that humans had become truly harmless. They had no idea that Earth's population wasn't just a collection of ordinary people, but a sleeping army that could awaken at a moment's notice. What's our time frame? He asked. 36 hours, Sarah replied grimly. Intelligence suggests they're planning to attempt communication with the others in less than 2 days. If they succeed in opening even a minor dimensional rift. She didn't need to finish. Marcus could access the archived data from the First War, could see the recordings of what happened when the others had first broken through into normal space. Entire solar systems had been consumed in minutes, their matter and energy converted into raw material for the others' incomprehensible purposes. Recommendations? Strike fast and hard, came a voice from another display. Marcus saw a young man who looked like he had been a college student until a few hours ago. I'm Guardian Patterson, and I've been analyzing their fleet compositions. They're strong defensively, but they've never faced human military technology. Our ships are designed to fight enemies that exist partially outside normal space. Their shields and weapons are optimized for conventional warfare. Agreed, Sarah said. But, we need to be careful about escalation. If we reveal our full capabilities too quickly, other species might panic and try to form alliances against us. The galaxy's peace has depended on everyone believing that humans are no longer a threat. Marcus considered this. The awakening had been necessary to deal with the hegemony threat, but it had also revealed humanity's true nature to any species with sophisticated sensors. They would have detected the energy signatures as humans throughout the solar system came online, would have seen the hidden bases and weapon platforms revealing themselves. What about our alien allies? He asked. Species that remember the old stories, that understand why the Covenant exists. I've been in contact with several, Sarah replied. The Kithra survivors that Zara mentioned, there are more than she knew about. The hegemony didn't find all of them. There's also a faction within the Vashti collective that has been secretly opposing the hegemony's expansion, and the Zelthrani resistance has been fighting a guerrilla war in the outer sectors for 50 years. Marcus felt a spark of hope. Humanity didn't have to face this threat alone. There were others who remembered the lessons of the First War, who understood that some powers were too dangerous to awaken. Open a channel to all Guardian units, he ordered. It's time to coordinate our response. The displays around him shifted again, now showing hundreds of human faces as awakened Guardians throughout the solar system and beyond linked into the communication network. Marcus felt the weight of their collective attention, their trust in his leadership, and the responsibility that came with commanding humanity's response to galactic crisis. Guardians, he began, his voice carrying to hidden bases and camouflaged ships throughout human space. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors made a choice. They chose to become something terrible and necessary to save the galaxy from an enemy that would have consumed everything. When that war ended, they chose to forget, to become ordinary, to let other species believe that humanity was no longer a threat. He paused, looking out at the faces of teachers and engineers, doctors and mechanics, all of them now glowing with the power they had inherited from humanity's greatest heroes. Today, we face that choice again. The hegemony thinks they can control the others, thinks they can make deals with entities that exist only to consume and destroy. They're wrong, and, if we don't stop them, their mistake will cost the galaxy everything. The response was immediate and unanimous, a wave of agreement that flowed through the network like electricity. These weren't soldiers who had been trained for war. They were ordinary people who had discovered they were capable of extraordinary things, and they were ready to use those capabilities to protect everything they cared about. Sarah, Marcus continued, take half the deep space units and move to intercept the hegemony research fleet. Don't engage unless they attempt to open a dimensional rift, but be ready to act if they do. Understood, she replied. What about the rest of us? We're going to do what humans do best, Marcus said with a grim smile. We're going to make impossible things possible. Guardian Henderson, I need you to coordinate with our alien allies, establish communication with any species that might oppose the hegemony. Guardian Williams, start reaching out to resistance movements within hegemony territory. If we're going to stop them, we need intelligence on their full capabilities. As the various Guardians acknowledged their orders and began to disperse to their assigned tasks, Marcus remained in the control center, studying the tactical displays and trying to anticipate every possible scenario. The hegemony had superior numbers, but they had made one critical error: they had awakened humanity before they were ready to deal with the consequences. Sir, came a new voice, and Marcus turned to see a young woman who appeared to be speaking from Earth's surface. Guardian Foster, currently at Luna City Medical Center. I've been monitoring communications from the hegemony fleet, and I think there's something you should know. Go ahead. They're not just trying to communicate with the others, she said, her face pale with worry. Based on the energy signatures I'm detecting from their research facilities, I think they're trying to summon them directly into normal space. Not just open a communication channel, bring them through completely. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. The dimensional locks that contained the others weren't just barriers, they were actively maintained by a network of quantum resonators that humanity had built throughout the galaxy. If the hegemony was attempting to bypass those locks entirely, to create new dimensional rifts that weren't part of the original containment system. How long before we know for certain? He asked. 6 hours, maybe less. The energy buildup suggests they're preparing for a major dimensional breach. Marcus closed his eyes and reached out through the network, touching the minds of every awakened Guardian. They had all heard Foster's report, and he could feel their shared determination hardening into something that would have terrified the hegemony if they had known what was coming. All units, he said quietly. Change of plans. We're not waiting for them to make the first move. If they want to wake the others, they'll have to go through us first. The response was immediate, hundreds of ships throughout human space altering course, weapon systems coming online, and Guardian units preparing for the kind of war that hadn't been fought in 3,000 years. As Marcus watched the tactical displays update to show humanity's true military capabilities, he thought about Emma, safely hidden on Earth with Zara and Mrs. Henderson's protection detail. His daughter had asked if he was going to space. He had told her yes, that he was going to help people who were in trouble. He just hadn't mentioned that those people included every living thing in the galaxy, and that the trouble they were in might be beyond anyone's ability to fix. But humans had done the impossible before. They had fought beings of pure destruction and, had found a way to save a galaxy that couldn't save itself. And, if they had to do it again, if they had to remember what they had once been and become something even more terrible and wonderful, then that's what they would do. After all, that's what Guardians were for. The hegemony research facility orbiting Vega Prime was a monument to arrogance disguised as scientific achievement. From the bridge of the Terran Guardian ship Retribution, Marcus watched the massive station through sensors that could perceive reality across 17 different dimensional phases. What the hegemony saw as a breakthrough in exotic physics, Marcus recognized as a catastrophe waiting to happen. The station itself was a grotesque fusion of technologies from dozens of species, each one contributing their most advanced capabilities to a project they clearly didn't understand. Zelthrani dimensional manipulators worked alongside Vashti quantum computers and Makari energy cores, all of them focused on a single point in space where reality had worn thin from their interference. Energy signatures are off the charts, reported Guardian Kim from her position at the sensor station. Not the Sarah Kim who had remained awake for 3 millennia, this was her daughter, born during the Long Watch and raised to understand humanity's true purpose. They're not just trying to open a gateway. They're trying to tear a hole in the dimensional barrier itself. Marcus felt his enhanced senses reach out toward the station, probing the edges of the experiment taking place within. What he found made his blood run cold. The hegemony scientists weren't just attempting to contact the others, they were trying to create a permanent breach between dimensions, a wound in reality that would allow unlimited travel between the prison realms and normal space. They think they can control it, he said quietly. They think they can open a small door, invite the others to negotiate, and, then, close it again when they're done. Idiots, came Sarah's voice over the communication link from her own ship. The original Sarah Kim, speaking from the bridge of the Eternal Vigil as it held position just outside the Vega system's heliopause. The others don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They consume. That's all they've ever done, all they can do. Marcus accessed the archived records of the First War, memories that had been carefully preserved by the Guardian Network for exactly this moment. He watched recordings of the others' first appearance in normal space, saw entire civilizations vanish in moments as reality itself was rewritten to serve incomprehensible alien purposes. The others weren't evil in any sense that organic minds could understand. They were more like a natural disaster given consciousness, a force of entropy that existed to break down complex structures and reduce them to their component elements. They had originally come from dimensions where the fundamental constants were different, where matter and energy behaved according to rules that made no sense in normal space. During the First War, humanity had learned to fight them by becoming something equally alien, equally removed from the normal rules of physics. The cost had been enormous, not just in lives lost, but in the fundamental changes humanity had undergone to become capable of such warfare. When the war ended, when the others were finally contained, humans had chosen to forget what they had become because the alternative was to remain monsters forever. Status report from the fleet, Marcus ordered. 1,200 ships in position, came the response from Guardian Martinez, coordinating the combined human and allied forces from her command vessel. The Kithra survivors have provided us with detailed intelligence about hegemony command structures, and the Zelthrani resistance has been feeding us real-time tactical data. We have the element of surprise. Marcus nodded, but he knew that surprise alone wouldn't be enough. The hegemony had committed massive resources to this project, and their ships were crewed by species that had been preparing for large-scale warfare for decades. More importantly, if they succeeded in opening a dimensional breach before the human fleet could stop them, superior tactics would become irrelevant very quickly. Time to dimensional breach, he asked. 37 minutes, Kim replied. Energy buildup is accelerating. Whatever they're doing, they're committed to it now. Marcus felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a familiar burden. 3,000 years ago, he had made decisions that saved the galaxy but cost humanity its innocence. Now he was being asked to make those same kinds of choices again. All ships, he said, opening a channel to the entire fleet. Begin final approach. Target priority is the dimensional manipulator array at the center of the station. Ignore everything else unless it directly threatens our ability to reach that target. The response was immediate as hundreds of ships dropped their stealth fields and accelerated toward the hegemony facility. Marcus watched the tactical displays as human vessels revealed themselves, ships that looked like works of art but moved with predatory grace, their hulls rippling with energy fields that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The hegemony defense fleet reacted with admirable speed, but it was clear they had no idea what they were facing. Their sensors couldn't track ships that phased in and out of reality, their weapons couldn't lock onto targets that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Within minutes, the carefully organized defensive formation had dissolved into chaos. But Marcus felt no satisfaction as he watched enemy ships burning in the vacuum. Each destroyed vessel represented hundreds of sentient beings who thought they were serving the greater good, who had no idea their research project was about to doom everything they cared about. Breach in the defensive perimeter, reported Guardian Singh from the Shadowhawk. We have a clear path to the station, but... Marcus, you need to see this. The main display shifted to show a close-up view of the station's central chamber, and Marcus felt his heart sink. The dimensional manipulator wasn't just preparing to open a gateway, it was already partially active. A sphere of twisted space hung in the center of the chamber, and, through its distorted surface, Marcus could see movement. Something was stirring in the dimensional prison, responding to the hegemony's calls. How long before full breach, he asked, though he dreaded the answer. 8 minutes, Kim replied. Maybe less if they push the power levels beyond safe parameters. Which they will, Sarah added grimly. The moment they realize we're here, they'll try to accelerate the process. They'd rather risk a catastrophic failure than let us stop them. Marcus made the calculation in his mind. 8 minutes to fight through the remaining defenses, board the station, and shut down equipment that was protected by the combined military might of 47 species. It wasn't impossible, but it would require tactics that humanity had hoped never to use again. Guardian Kim, he said quietly. Prepare for Phase 7 protocols. There was a moment of silence on the bridge. Phase 7 was the designation for the combat techniques humanity had developed during the darkest days of the First War, methods that required Guardians to interface directly with their ship's weapon systems through quantum entanglement. It was incredibly effective, but it also meant temporarily merging human consciousness with artificial intelligence systems designed for warfare, allowing the human mind to process tactical information at superhuman speeds while simultaneously controlling weapons that could reshape reality. The side effects were significant. Sir, Kim said carefully, Phase 7 protocols have a 70% chance of permanent psychological damage. The neural patterns required for direct interface with Guardian-class weapon systems, I know the risks, Marcus interrupted. But, if we don't stop this breach, there won't be any minds left to damage. He reached for the interface crown that had materialized beside his command chair, the same device he had used 3,000 years ago to become something more and less than human. As his fingers closed around the neural circuitry, he felt the ship's consciousness reach out to touch his mind. Welcome back, Guardian, the ship said, its voice speaking directly into his thoughts. It has been a long time since we were one mind. Marcus placed the crown on his head and felt reality explode into a symphony of data and possibility. Suddenly, he wasn't just commanding the ship, he was the ship. His consciousness expanded to encompass sensors that could perceive quantum fluctuations and weapons that could tear holes in the fabric of spacetime itself. Through the ship's enhanced senses, he could see the battle unfolding around the station with perfect clarity. Each Guardian vessel was a node of concentrated human will, their crews fighting with techniques that had been developed to combat entities that existed outside normal physics. The hegemony forces were brave and well-trained, but they were fighting according to rules that humanity had learned to ignore millennia ago. Target acquired, the ship reported, highlighting the dimensional manipulator at the station's core. Probability of successful penetration, 63% with conventional weapons. 97% with Phase 7 armaments. Marcus felt the weapon systems come online, devices that existed partially in normal space and partially in the same dimensional realms where the others were imprisoned. Using them would mean revealing capabilities that humanity had kept hidden since the end of the First War, showing the galaxy exactly what the Guardians were capable of when they stopped pretending to be ordinary humans. But, as he watched the dimensional breach continue to expand, as he saw something vast and hungry stirring behind the distorted barrier, Marcus knew he had no choice. Phase 7 weapons, he said. Fire. The Retribution shuddered as reality bent around its main cannon, a beam of pure transformation that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The weapon didn't just destroy matter, it convinced the universe that the matter had never existed in the first place, rewriting the quantum information that defined the target's existence. The station's outer defenses simply vanished, their atoms convinced to become something else entirely. Secondary explosions rippled through the facility as systems designed by different species tried to compensate for the sudden absence of their protective barriers. But, even as Marcus carved a path toward the dimensional manipulator, he could see that they might be too late. The sphere of twisted space was expanding, its surface beginning to solidify into something that could support transit between dimensions. Through the distortion, Marcus caught a glimpse of the realm where the others waited, a landscape of impossible geometries where physics worked according to rules that would drive a normal mind insane just to contemplate. And, something was moving through that landscape, heading for the breach. All ships, Marcus broadcast, his voice carrying through both normal communication channels and the quantum entanglement field that linked Guardian vessels. Convergent assault on the manipulator array. We have 90 seconds before the breach stabilizes. The response was immediate as the entire Guardian fleet focused their fire on the station's core. Reality twisted and bent as hundreds of Phase 7 weapons discharged simultaneously, their combined effect warping spacetime itself around the target. The dimensional manipulator began to buckle under the assault, its exotic matter components unable to withstand forces that existed outside normal physics. But, even as the device began to fail, the breach continued to expand. Whatever was approaching from the other realm was almost at the threshold, and Marcus could feel its alien hunger like a pressure against his expanded consciousness. 30 seconds, Kim reported, her voice strained from the neural interface. The manipulator is failing, but the breach has gained its own momentum. Even if we destroy the generating equipment, the portal might remain open. Marcus felt despair begin to creep into his enhanced awareness. They had responded as quickly as possible, had used weapons and tactics that revealed humanity's true nature to anyone watching, but they might still be too late to prevent catastrophe. Then, he felt another presence touch his mind through the quantum field, Sarah, interfacing with her own ship systems from her position outside the system. There is another way, she said, her thoughts carrying the weight of 3 millennia of solitary vigil. The dimensional locks that contain the others, we can overload them. Create a cascade failure that will destabilize every artificial breach in this sector of space. Marcus understood immediately, and felt his enhanced mind recoil from the implications. The dimensional locks weren't just prisons, they were actively maintained barriers that required constant adjustment to remain stable. Overloading them would indeed collapse any artificial breaches, but it would also weaken the entire containment system. The risk, 10% chance that the primary locks will fail completely. 1% chance that we accidentally release the others anyway. But, if we don't act, the breach will stabilize in 15 seconds and we'll have 0% chance of preventing catastrophe. Marcus felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. Save the galaxy by risking its destruction, or watch helplessly as the others broke free anyway. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice that had defined the First War, the reason humanity had chosen to forget what they had become. But, Emma was back on Earth, trusting him to come home safely. Zara was there too, believing that humans would protect her the way her mother had promised. And, across the galaxy, billions of beings lived their lives in peace because they trusted that the Guardians would always be watching, always be ready to make the hard choices. Do it, he said. The dimensional locks throughout the local galactic cluster pulsed once, their quantum resonance frequencies shifting in perfect synchronization. The effect was immediate, the artificial breach began to collapse, its exotic matter framework unable to maintain stability without the steady gravitational constant provided by the locks. But, Marcus could feel the price they were paying. Every lock they overloaded weakened the entire network, bringing the others that much closer to freedom. If they were forced to use this technique again, if another crisis required them to further compromise the containment system, there might not be enough stability left to keep the ancient prison sealed. The sphere of twisted space collapsed in on itself, taking the approaching other entity with it. The dimensional manipulator exploded as its exotic matter components tried to exist in 17 different realities simultaneously, the chain reaction consuming the entire hegemony research station in a brief star that outshone Vega itself. Breach sealed, Kim reported, though her voice carried the exhaustion that came from neural interface withdrawal. No further dimensional activity detected. Marcus removed the interface crown, feeling his consciousness contract back to normal human parameters. The transition was always disorienting, like trying to fit an ocean into a teacup, but he had experienced it before. Around them, the Guardian fleet was powering down their Phase 7 weapons, their ships returning to the stealth configurations that had hidden them for 3,000 years. But, Marcus knew that the secret was out now. The hegemony survivors would report what they had seen, would tell the galaxy that humans possessed weapons and capabilities that made their combined fleets look like children playing with toys. Incoming transmission, Singh reported. Multiple sources throughout hegemony space. They're requesting negotiation. Marcus wasn't surprised. The hegemony had gambled that they could control powers beyond their understanding, and they had lost spectacularly. Now they wanted to discuss terms before humanity decided to eliminate them as a threat entirely. Tell them we'll consider their request, Marcus said. But, first, they need to release all the prisoners they've taken from species that maintained archives about the First War. They need to shut down all research into dimensional manipulation technology. And, they need to accept Guardian oversight of any future scientific projects that might threaten galactic stability. It wasn't conquest, the Covenant still held, and humanity would honor its commitment to peace. But, the galaxy would have to accept that humans were no longer hiding their true nature, no longer pretending to be ordinary citizens of a peaceful federation. They were the Guardians again, whether anyone liked it or not. As the fleet began its journey back to human space, Marcus thought about the price they had paid for this victory. The dimensional locks were weaker now, the containment system stressed by their emergency measures. If another crisis arose, if someone else tried to wake the others, humanity might not be able to stop them without risking everything. But, for now, the galaxy was safe. And, when Marcus returned to Earth, when he hugged his daughter and told her about his trip to space, he could honestly say that he had helped people who were in trouble. He just wouldn't mention that those people included everyone and everything that had ever lived, or that the trouble had been one mistake away from ending all existence as they knew it. After all, some secrets were too heavy for a 7-year-old to carry. 6 months after the Vega incident, as historians were already calling it, Marcus stood in his backyard watching Emma and Zara play in the garden they had planted together. The alien girl had adapted to Earth life with remarkable resilience, though she still glowed faintly when she was happy and her hair continued to move with its own subtle intelligence. More importantly, she had become the sister Emma had always wanted, and, watching them laugh as they chased butterflies between the tomato plants made all the cosmic responsibilities seem worthwhile. The garden itself was a marvel that would have been impossible before the awakening. Emma's developing human abilities allowed her to encourage plant growth with nothing more than focused intention, while Zara's Kithra heritage let her communicate directly with the soil microorganisms that made the entire ecosystem function. Together, they had created a small paradise that produced vegetables unlike anything Marcus had ever tasted. The new delegation from the Centauri Collective arrived this morning, Mrs. Henderson called from the porch, where she was reviewing reports from Guardian stations throughout human space. They're requesting permission to establish a cultural exchange program with Earth. Apparently, their youth want to learn human agricultural techniques. Marcus smiled as he watched Emma show Zara how to coax a shy flower bud into blooming. The girl's natural talent for nurturing living things had been enhanced by her awakening, but it was still fundamentally the same gentle spirit that Sarah had loved so much. Some things about humanity, Marcus reflected, were worth preserving exactly as they were. Tell them we'll consider it, he replied. But, they'll need to go through the standard diplomatic channels. No special treatment just because they're offering to share their music archives. The past 6 months had been a delicate balancing act as the galaxy adjusted to humanity's revealed nature. The Covenant of Silence had officially ended with the Vega incident, but something new was emerging to take its place, a more complex arrangement that acknowledged human power while preserving the peaceful coexistence that had defined galactic civilization for 3 millennia. Some species had reacted with fear, forming defensive alliances and demanding that humans be contained or monitored. Others had welcomed the return of the Guardians, recognizing that the threats that had originally required human intervention had never truly disappeared. The others were still imprisoned in their dimensional cages, and other ancient dangers still lurked in the dark spaces between stars. Most importantly, species like the Kithera who had maintained the old knowledge were finally free to share their archives openly. The galaxy was rediscovering its own history, learning lessons that had been hidden for fear of awakening sleeping giants. "Marcus," came Sarah's voice from the communication device on the porch table. She was currently aboard the Eternal Vigil, patrolling the outer edges of human space where reality was still healing from the dimensional stresses of the Vega incident. "We've got an interesting development in the Kepler sector." Marcus kissed the top of Emma's head as she ran past chasing a butterfly, then walked over to take the call. "What kind of development?" "The good kind," Sarah replied, and he could hear the satisfaction in her voice. 3 more species have come forward with preserved archives from the First War. The Threnodai Collective had an entire library hidden in a hollowed-out asteroid, and the Veiled Dancers apparently maintained a oral tradition that includes tactical information we thought was lost forever. Marcus felt a surge of relief. Each recovered archive made the galaxy a little bit safer, providing crucial intelligence about the others and the ancient threats that the dimensional locks were designed to contain. More importantly, it proved that the Covenant of Silence hadn't been the disaster some historians had predicted. By forcing species to hide their knowledge, it had actually preserved information that might otherwise have been lost or corrupted over time. "Any requests for Guardian assistance?" "Actually, yes. The Makari Federation wants us to help them investigate some unusual dimensional readings in their home system. Nothing immediately dangerous, but they're worried it might be connected to some experiments their ancestors conducted during the First War." Marcus considered this. The Makari had been one of the most scientifically advanced species during the ancient conflict, and their experiments with exotic physics had occasionally produced results that were almost as dangerous as the others themselves. If they were detecting anomalous readings now, 3,000 years after their ancestors' research had supposedly been abandoned, it definitely warranted investigation. "Send Guardian Team 7, he decided. They have experience with Makari technology, and they're currently stationed near that sector anyway. As Sarah confirmed the assignment and signed off, Marcus reflected on how strange his life had become. 6 months ago, his biggest worry had been making sure Emma ate her vegetables. Now he was coordinating humanity's response to galactic crises while trying to maintain the illusion of normal suburban life. But the illusion wasn't entirely false. Emma was still his 7-year-old daughter, still fascinated by butterflies and prone to crying when she scraped her knee. Zara was still a child recovering from trauma, still needed bedtime stories and reassurance that the monsters couldn't find her here. And Marcus was still fundamentally the same person who had opened his door to a scared alien girl seeking refuge. The awakening had given them abilities and responsibilities beyond imagination, but it hadn't changed who they were at heart. If anything, it had clarified what was truly important, not the power to reshape reality or command fleets of starships, but the simple human impulse to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "Daddy," Emma called from the garden, "Zara wants to know if we can plant something that glows like she does. She says her people used to grow light flowers that helped them see in the deep caves." Marcus looked at Zara, who was standing beside a tomato plant that was already producing fruit despite having been planted only last week. The girl's skin was slightly luminescent with happiness, and her silver hair was practically dancing in the afternoon sunlight. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said. "But we'll need to make sure the light flowers don't interfere with our neighbors' sleep. Mrs. Henderson is already getting complaints about how our vegetables are growing too fast." Both girls giggled at that, and Marcus felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This was what he was really fighting for, not abstract concepts like galactic stability or dimensional integrity, but the simple right of children to play in gardens and dream about impossible things. His communication device chimed again, and Marcus glanced at the display to see an encrypted message from the Guardian High Council. They met once a week now, coordinating humanity's response to the various crises that seemed to emerge whenever species started digging too deeply into their own histories. The message was brief but concerning. dimensional fluctuations detected in Sector 7 Alpha. Possible attempt to recreate hegemony research. Your expertise requested for emergency consultation. Marcus sighed, recognizing the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone else was playing with forces they didn't understand, and humanity would need to intervene before they accidentally destroyed everything. But, first, he had a more immediate responsibility. "Girls," he called, "it's time to come in and wash up for dinner. Zara, would you like to help me make those noodles you taught me about?" As they trooped into the house, chattering about light flowers and butterfly migration patterns, Marcus activated his communication device and sent a reply to the High Council: "Will attend emergency session after domestic responsibilities are complete. Estimate 2 hours." It was a small act of defiance against the cosmic scope of his duties, but Marcus had learned that the small things mattered most. Emma needed her father to be present for dinner, needed to know that saving the galaxy didn't mean abandoning the people who depended on him personally. And Zara needed the stability of routine, the reassurance that came from simple human normalcy. Besides, the galaxy had survived for 3,000 years without constant guardian intervention. It could wait another 2 hours while he helped his daughters with their homework and made sure they brushed their teeth before bed. Later that evening, after Emma and Zara had been tucked in with their respective bedtime stories, Marcus joined the emergency council session from his home office. The holographic display showed dozens of Guardian commanders scattered throughout human space, their faces grim with familiar concern. "Status report," he said as the session came to order. "The Threnodai Collective's archaeological team has discovered what appears to be a functioning hegemony research station in the ruins of their homeworld," reported Guardian Martinez from her position aboard the Steel Resolve. "The station was apparently hidden beneath the planet's surface during the original conflict and has remained active all this time." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. The hegemony had been disbanded after the Vega incident, their leadership either imprisoned or killed in the chaos that followed their failed experiment. But, if they had maintained secret installations, if they had been continuing their research even after the dimensional breach was sealed. "Estimated threat level?" "Unknown," Martinez replied. "The Threnodai haven't attempted to enter the facility yet, but their sensors are detecting massive energy buildups consistent with dimensional manipulation technology. Could be anything from a simple power core to another attempt at breaching the other's prison." Marcus accessed the tactical databases through his home terminal, reviewing everything they knew about hegemony research methodologies. The Alien Confederation had been obsessed with finding ways to control powers beyond their understanding, convinced that the right combination of technology and willpower could tame forces that had destroyed civilizations across multiple dimensions. "Recommendations?" "Full Guardian response," said a voice Marcus recognized as Commander Torres, one of the younger officers who had awakened during the Vega crisis. "If there's even a chance they're trying to contact the others again, we can't afford to take any chances." Marcus understood the sentiment, but he also remembered the cost of their last intervention. The dimensional locks were still weakened from the emergency measures they had taken, and another crisis requiring similar tactics might push the containment system beyond its breaking point. "What about a diplomatic approach?" he suggested. "The Threnodai have been cooperative since we helped them recover their archives.